Hello and welcome to another edition of the Simsbury Woman. My name is Shannon Knall. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Today, unfortunately, will be my last show as host of the Simsbury Woman, as my family has taken an opportunity to move to another state and pursue our family life there. So I'll get to that a little bit more at the end of the show, but I just wanted to thank all the people of Simsbury for watching and being engaged in the stories that we've been able to tell here. Joining me today is my friend Dominique Avery, who has been a guest on my show before, extremely involved in the community. And I want to start our discussion today by talking about the importance of being involved in your community. I think for me, one of the reasons that I started this show was to showcase the stories of Simsbury women and all of the things that they are doing that fly under the radar oftentimes, but they're critical to the daily operation of our lives here. So you being one of those women, let's start off talking about that.
Well, the reason I think I'm involved in a lot of things, but one of the things I'm heavily involved in is SCTV, our station here, which gives people in our community an opportunity to learn what's going on in the community and an inside look, a behind-the-scenes look at what's going on, as well as all the meetings that we bring. We have an extraordinary opportunity in Simsbury with this community television station that a lot of people aren't aware of. And just this week, we're recording this the day after the December 8th Board of Selectmen meeting at which Mary's resignation was acknowledged and Lisa Havner was reappointed, and the board did all they did to reverse the original decision. And Mary said something really important last night that goes to what we're talking about. I made a note of it last night. She said that the incident was a signal that people need to pay attention to decisions being made and speak out. And she found a silver lining in the whole event, and that was the number of people who were energized to speak out. And she thought that maybe it meant that more people will be engaged in the community.
Right. I certainly, as unfortunate as this situation became, it is certainly my hope and encouraging to see so many people turned out last night to make their voices heard. So many people signed a petition to make sure that they were heard as well. And political or not, your participation in community life doesn't have to be that big. It can be what you do on a daily basis, but all of it is important.
So, Shannon, let me ask you, before I talk more about what I do, I didn't even know you were a Simsbury resident. I knew you from the state capitol. I worked at the state capitol for CTN as a program director, and we covered a lot of events having to do with autism, and I kept seeing the name Shannon Knall. We typed up all the names, and I typed up your title, and over the years, you were there over and over again, and you had enormous success. So tell me a little bit about how you got involved in that, why you got involved in it, so that people of Simsbury know. A lot of people know already, but a lot of people don't.
That's really nice to hear, because sometimes you feel like you're talking into outer space and no one is listening. But a lot of people know my story, that I became involved in the in autism awareness and equality for people with disabilities as a result of my son's autism. I quickly learned after he was diagnosed with autism that many of the people who were in a position to change policy surrounding his lifelong care didn't know anything about it. So I think it's just a part of who I am, that I don't like to let life direct me. I would like to have some control of what's going on for me and for my family. And I felt it was very important that our policymakers understood what autism was and how it impacted families like mine. And so in the first months of dealing with this diagnosis, I reached out to then candidate for Congress, Chris Murphy. And that was really my foray into, go big or go home, I guess, right? So that was my first foray into dealing with legislators and educating them about autism and my family in particular. But once I learned that legislators really wanted to listen and policymakers really wanted to understand this and really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of what happened, I found my voice was bigger. And I found that I could influence or affect change for many people, in partnership with many other advocates like myself who have been doing this for a very long time.
So you talked about Chris Murphy, did you? I mean, there are people out there who maybe would like to be engaged in their community or in some issue. Did you pick up the phone and call Chris, or
I did.
You did?
I did.
And he answered?
No, he was campaigning at that time against Nancy Johnson, and it's a very simple story, actually, and a good life lesson. I called both of them to ask them what their positions were on autism and what they knew about it, and Nancy Johnson did not call me back, and Chris Murphy did. It's a very simple story from there. I mean, that's the job of a political leader, is to be responsive to their constituents, and he was immediately, and we have forged a nice partnership over the years, and now into his Senate life, he's been a true champion for us.
Was Chris Murphy he was still a state senator at the time?
He was still,
and
yes.
He had been chairman of the Public Health Committee, so my guess
Correct.
is that he did know something. But Nancy Johnson also had considerable health experience.
Yes, he was aware of autism. He had been involved in mental health parity that had been written in the state, which was a good starting point for us, but our needs go well beyond that. So it's been a nice partnership, and I've enjoyed working with him tremendously.
So, was the organization Autism Speaks? Did it exist already? Did you join with it? Tell me a little bit more about how all this came to be.
Well, again, in the first months of diagnosis, I was desperately looking for people who had information, and there was an organization somewhat locally in Boston, that's as local as we could get, called the National Alliance for Autism Research, which has since merged into Autism Speaks. Again, this little part of who I am is that I don't like to sit by the sidelines. So I launched the inaugural Walk Now for Autism in Greater Hartford in 2006. And we started with, 2,000 people at Elizabeth Park. And we are now, next year will be the 10th anniversary, and it's up to 10,000 people at Rentschler Field. So always a bittersweet story, because while it's so lovely to have that much support, it's just indicative of how the numbers are skyrocketing.
Right. So then you got involved with this organization, and I know you held a number of forums. You spoke at public hearings. Mm-hmm. You managed to get legislation passed, major legislation. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's pretty exciting. I call it my fourth child. It was in 2010 we passed, Connecticut became the 13th state in the nation to make private insurance companies pay for the diagnosis and treatment of autism. And this was such an important step, particularly in Connecticut, with the reputation of being the insurance capital of the world, that we were able to tell a compelling story and share the necessity of this coverage for our families, that we needed our children to be something worth investing in and creating a future for them. So I'm so pleased. I'm still so pleased that happened. It was a bipartisan or a nonpartisan issue with unanimous consent in both the House and the Senate.
Did you have a lot of help from the then Speaker of the House, Jim Amon, before he left?
Jim Amon was, in fact, he was critical to the first go-around of trying to pass that legislation. We like to do things in baby steps. We can't do it all at once.
Especially in Connecticut.
Right. So in 2009, we mandated that speech and occupational therapy were covered under insurance. And then the next year we went back for the big one, but he had already left office. Right. It was Speaker Donovan, and Senate Majority Leader Marty Looney, who was so critical to getting that out of the House and out of the Senate.
So that's your amazing career. So then I had no idea that you lived in Simsbury. But then the next time I sort of heard of you, suddenly I heard some talk that you were going to be running, or that you were appointed to replace, I can't remember exactly how it was, John Hampton's seat, something. No, it wasn't John Hampton's seat. That was Jeff Blumenthal. Straighten me out on your political career.
Well,
I've forgotten.
it's a torrid tale. I first was asked by Mary and Lisa Hebner to consider running for the Board of Selectmen, and I guess it was 2011. So that was my first foray into campaigning for anything. And I will say that one thing people need to understand about running for political office, particularly the Board of Selectmen in Simsbury, is that it is brutal work. It is hard work. And often, as I know, results do not translate from hard work. But these are hardworking volunteers, which is very important for people to know. They, aside from the first selectman, they are not getting paid for their work. So that was my first foray. I did lose that race, but then was appointed to take John Hampton's seat when he became.
So it was John Hampton, right?
Yes, state representative. So, and then I ran again in 2013 and lost again. So it clearly was just not meant to be, but it was one of the greatest things that I have accomplished. I feel very proud of the opportunity to be able to serve here.
So tell me why running for office, I have an inkling, but maybe some people out there should hear, why is it so difficult? What do you have to do, and why is it so hard?
It's, you have to get your message out, and you have to convey to people who you are and what you stand for. And that is not something you can do by standing in the middle of town square and presenting yourself. You have to be door knocking, and you have to be at events and talking to people and sharing your message and sharing why you feel that you are a credible contestant, if you will, for office. And oftentimes the response from people is not always civil. People have differing opinions, which they willingly share. So it can be challenging.
Do you think that you have politics in your future, or are you done with it?
Well, never say never, but I don't know. I think politics is something that, being involved in the political process is something that I think is extremely important. I will likely never stop talking about autism as long as there's a breath in my body. I will be talking about that, and because there's so much work to be done. As for a political future, I don't know.
But it's important that we don't leave people with the impression that politics, local politics, is so awful and it's so difficult, because we would really like to encourage more people to get involved.
Absolutely. And most of the time, it is a fantastic way to get more entrenched in your community, to understand what makes it tick, to get to know the fantastic people of this town. There are amazing, outstanding people doing wonderful things every day that no one knows about, and that perhaps is the greatest asset of being in public office.
So maybe this is a good opportunity for me to tell you and maybe some other people the story of how I met Mary and how she got into politics. I moved to Simsbury in 1990 and really didn't know anybody. And there was an election the following fall. I moved in the summer, and a year later, and I was invited to a coffee at a woman's house where Mary Glassman was speaking. She was running for selectman. And she disclosed to us that she really hadn't wanted to run, that she had, that she didn't really say she didn't want to win, but she said that she'd sort of been promised that this was a Republican town and she would not win because the Republicans had been in office for so long. And she gamely said, okay, I'll run, I'll be a credible candidate, I'll talk about the issues. What she had not disclosed to anybody was that she was pregnant.
Right.
And, but I was impressed by this woman. And at the time we had a selectman, Ted Tansey, who my husband played golf with, who was a really nice guy, but he was a little abrasive, and SCTV had just started, and a lot of people saw him on TV and didn't like him. And suddenly, the morning after the election day, Mary had won. It was stunning. It was absolutely stunning. Joe Townsley told the story last night. She was just aghast. She was expecting a baby. She said, what do I do? But what had happened was, I think that everybody in town said to themselves in their voting booth, we still had voting booths at the time, I'm going to send Ted Tansey a little message that we don't like this kind of abrasive politics. And so many people did it that Mary was elected. In any case, I was impressed by her, and I chose to get involved in a small way on the recycling committee.
Right.
And then I got to know Mary better through that way, and then I was involved in a number of other things. She was involved in my efforts to found the Bridge of Flowers.
Right.
And in every way, Mary, I just have to say this, she was amazing in her leadership. She had a quiet leadership. She didn't order you to do anything. She didn't browbeat you, but she has an amazing talent for inspiring you to do things.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why Simsbury has thrived under her.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a small example of that. Last summer, I'm the co-chair of the Simsbury Tourism Committee, and last summer I forwarded something about the state's tourism contest to Mary's office, and she jumped on it and she said, we have to do this. We hadn't done it the year before. And so she called a meeting of me and Sarah Florowski-Nielsen from Main Street and the part-time communications person. Right. And the three of us sat around and said, oh, God, do we want to do this? How much work is it? We don't have any money. What shall we do? What shall our focus be? And we talked for half an hour. Mary wasn't at the meeting yet. Mary walked in to the meeting. She sat down with us for 5 minutes and she said, well, this is what we're going to do. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and we'll do it.
Right.
And she got us started, and I didn't want to disappoint her. And so we started. And the upshot was that Simsbury was voted the 7th top tourism community in the state because we were dickering around, we didn't know what to do, and she just cut to the chase and said, do it.
Right.
And we did.
Right.
And she does that over and over again.
She does. And I think, Mary and Lisa have been tremendous mentors to me and role models and examples of how one should conduct oneself as a public official. And I think Mary said something to me last year that is very simple but has stayed with me, that and she said, if you do the right thing, you can't go wrong. And it's so simple, but it's such an important little nugget to live by, especially when there are other things going on and you can get caught up in all of these other situations on the side. It was just something that I will carry with me.
We've been really extraordinarily lucky to have her. She started out from nothing, knowing nothing, and she's become this extraordinary leader in our town by example, as you said, and just by her gentle pushing.
Right.
One of the things that I'll remember her most for is when we first moved to town in 1990, we were losing our power all the time. And nobody had been able to get the power company to do anything about it. She got on them and persuaded them to put a transformer instead of in Bloomfield on the Simsbury side, and I haven't lost power except for the major power since then. And I'm really grateful to her.
Absolutely.
But she stuck with it, and a lot of people in town are also not aware of her state career.
Right.
After she left, in between, because you worked at the state, she worked for the Speaker of the House.
Right.
She worked for the Senate President. She was the Chief of Staff for the Lieutenant Governor.
Right.
She worked as an advocate. She was head of the Organization of Cities and Towns, CCM. And so her wide ranging influence is what attracted so much attention to this story. So today it was on the front page of the Hartford Courant.
I know. I know.
We will miss her.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm hoping, again, from what we saw last night, that people can take that passion and take their convictions and apply it to, continuing to make Simsbury the great place that it is. It wouldn't be this great without people doing this work on a daily basis.
So there are all kinds of places where people can get involved in town. So maybe we should detail some of them.
And it doesn't even have to be in town. It can be starting, if you have kids in the school, you can get involved with PTO activities. If you are inclined to be involved in the runnings of the town, you can absolutely do that on any level that you wish. It could even be participating in an event that is organized by, say, the recycling committee, or volunteering for SCTV, perhaps, because we always need camera operators and people to keep this place running and sharing the business of what goes on in town. So people don't have to be intimidated by thinking that they have to always be doing the biggest thing, because the little things are big too.
So there are some people lean in. There's a lot of books out there. There's some top women executives who have advised people not to start at the PTO level for mothers who are home. They say, what do you think about that?
Well, I think the PTO is critical to creating a balance between parent and school life. The people who are involved, mostly women, are doing yeoman's work behind the scenes and really keeping the wheels going in schools. And I think it's a great way to be involved in your school, in your child's life, without being a hovering parent. That's my
helicopter parent.
Right.
Yeah, I think their point was mainly, if you want to keep your finger in the business world, that if the PTO work does not really translate to a resume.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. I think that there are a lot of people management skills that are necessary for navigating the PTO that are very translatable to the business world. I mean, we always need to know how to relate to others and how to navigate difficult situations.
So there's a garden club, there's everything available. I mean, Simsbury has some teenagers call it Simsburying, or I don't know if they still do, but at least for grown-ups, there is so much going on here.
There is a lot going on here.
So there's boards and commissions.
Correct.
There are boards, there's like the tourism committee, which is a group of 9 or 10 people who are interested in what's going on in town and letting other people know what's going on, but it's not that much work.
Right.
There's the Aging and Disability Committee,
right,
which is not that much work. There's all kinds
Historical
of things.
Society.
Historical Society, which has been doing yeoman's work. There's the library.
Absolutely.
There's the free library.
The Flower Bridge.
The Flower Bridge, right. There are an amazing number of places.
Right. And I would urge people to visit the Town of Simsbury website to really get to know what sort of other opportunities are out there for being involved in the community. I think we have a couple of minutes left, so maybe, as a community, I don't want to use the word activist, but an active community leader, what do you think, what would you advise people to do? How would you advise them to start getting involved? Two little things.
What you said, I would think about what my interest is. My first interest, the easiest one, was recycling.
Right.
I'd been interested in since Earth Day started. I just went to a meeting. All these meetings are public. I went to a meeting and sat and watched what they were doing and offered my opinion after a while when there was discussion, especially informal meetings, not like the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance where there's formal a public audience. Right. But the smaller committees, you can, whatever your interest is, the Chamber of Commerce is also a place where you can work.
Yes.
Performing Arts Council, there are so many things. You can go to these meetings and just watch.
Right.
And you can watch a lot of them on SCTV.
Yes. And you don't have to say anything.
Right.
But I do want to reiterate one of the points that I made earlier, that people do want to hear. They do want feedback, and they do want to talk to constituents and neighbors and friends on an informal or formal basis about what they're doing and how it can be done differently, better, or whatever. So it is really important, and I feel very strongly about this, that people do recognize that and do really perhaps go out of their comfort zone every now and then to speak up and be counted, so to speak.
Right, there's a lot, there's just a lot of opportunity, but the important thing is that people feel connected to the community and get involved and not feel like there isn't a place for them.
Right.
And the community needs them.
Absolutely. The community does need them, which is important as well. Well, thank you, Dominique, for taking this time to be here with me today on my last show. I have lost count of how many shows I have actually done, but there have been amazing ones. Everyone has been an amazing opportunity to do what I love, which is talk. And as something that I mentioned earlier, one of the great things about being on the Board of Selectmen is that I met all these wonderful people and had the opportunity to hear their stories and carry them with me. And I think doing this show has afforded me that same opportunity and the chance to meet extraordinary women doing extraordinary things that they may not think are necessarily extraordinary, and share those stories with the community. So that's been a privilege.
And I want to thank you for doing it, and I want to thank you for everything that you've given to the state and to the town of Simsbury, and we will miss you.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that I got to turn the tables a little on you and hear a little bit more about your story today.
Thank you. That was good for me. So thank you for joining me here on every show, and for our last edition of the Simsbury Woman. I wish all of you the best. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.